Welcome to Keeping Rats and Mice Out, our very first webinar in our Kick the Chemicals series. And this is a free series of webinars with 3 local nonprofits that are collaborating, like I mentioned. UC Marin Master Gardeners, Our Water, Our World, and YardSmartMarin. And what unifies all 3 of our groups is that we're great resources for finding safer and effective alternatives to pesticides, things that are least toxic and proven most effective with evidence, not necessarily the ads that you might hear. All 3 of our groups are grounded in the same science-based method, which is called Integrated Pest Management, IPM. Integrated pest management is a problem-solving approach that's committed to finding the least toxic but effective solution while minimizing risks to both people and our environment. And the good news is there's lots of ways to solve very common home and garden problems without resorting to conventional pesticides. So what we want you to take away from today, and I'm just going to say this right at the top, is that when you're faced with a pest problem, we want you to remember to stop, think, and protect. And that's actually what integrated pest management is. And you won't really hear us talk about that a lot more, but it's the method for finding an effective, safer solution. And let me talk a little bit more about that. So when you're faced with a pest problem, whether it be a rodent or a weed or a plant disease or a bug, we want you to remember to stop before you reach for toxic chemicals that you might see in the store shelf or that a pest control or even landscape company might be using unless you've asked them. And we want you to think about safer, effective, least toxic alternatives that will solve your problem. And that's why we're all here in the community to help connect you to that, that information and those proven safer alternatives. So stop, think, and protect. Find a solution that will protect what matters: our own health, the health of our children, our pets, our environment, and our local wildlife, from raptors to pollinators to our ecosystem at large. And that's what today is about. We're going to focus on rodents, and Suzanne Bontempo is going to share very effective, scientifically proven ways to prevent problems and to solve them with least toxic methods. And by the way, we're talking rats, and I get it. If I see a rat scurry across my fence in the backyard, I totally understand the common impulse to reach for a rodenticide or call a pest control company that may use rodenticides. But the one takeaway from today is we do want you to stop and think about whether it's really a problem. And for me, if that rat is outside on my fence, that's okay. I want to make sure he's not in my house. And we'll talk very much about preventing problems as well as solving them. And with that, I want to turn it over to Suzanne, who's going to take us through some science-based effective solutions that will protect what matters most. And we look forward to, I'm seeing a lot of joined us. We're going to look forward to answering lots of questions at the end. So feel free as we go through today, put your questions in the chat. We'll have time to answer them. And for those of you that also joined us in the chat, there's a link to an outline for today that you can make accessible. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our fantastic speaker, Suzanne Bontempo from Our Water, Our World.
Thank you, Rika, so much. Thank you, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today to talk to you all about some serious problems we're all faced with, and they're not really fun. But Eureka mentioned we're in partnership with the Marin Master Gardeners and with YardSmartMarin and Our Water, Our World. As the program manager for Our Water, Our World, I want to just briefly touch on our program. I'm sure you're familiar with it if you shop at any of our local garden centers and hardware stores here in Marin County. We are a national award-winning program. Our Water, Our World brings awareness between pesticides and water quality. we're an integrated pest management educational program, and we partner with retailers and local stormwater agencies. So I just want to share that a little bit so that oftentimes people are not familiar with Our Water, Our World. So next. Okay, so today we're going to talk about keeping rats and mice out, integrated pest management solutions for these rodents and other critters that we might be faced with. And our agenda today, sorry, I'm just getting my screen set up. Our agenda today is that we're going to be going through slides for about 40 minutes. And then we're going to leave time for all of your questions afterwards. What we're going to be learning about or going through are best practices for managing rats and mice, gophers, moles, and voles, squirrels, raccoons, and other critters. Now, I want to share that this is a very short program, and I could very well spend an entire hour on each of these critters. So this is just really going to be an overview, okay? So I just want to let you all know that. Okay, so as Rika mentioned, integrated pest management, or IPM, it's a decision-making process that uses science-based strategies to solve pest problems. It allows us to look at the system as a whole, our house or our garden, and we want to identify what the problem is. Oftentimes what we're seeing are symptoms of a problem. And until we can identify that problem, we're not able to solve it. So in the case of rats coming in the house, yeah, rats coming in the house, rats in my house is a nuisance, but it's not exactly the problem. The problem is that there's holes in the house. And until I solve that problem and seal off those points of entry, I can't solve the problem. It's a great example of what integrated pest management is. From there, when we identify the problem, we decide if we can live with it. Absolutely cannot live with rodents in my house. And then if necessary, what type of action do we take? And under the IPM umbrella, the different types of actions are going to be cultural controls, bolstering the health of the environment, mechanical controls, using tools to manage the pests, biological controls, inviting living organisms to manage the pests, and chemical controls. Chemical controls are the pesticides. We're always going to use these as a last resort. We're always going to use the least toxic possible. Now, something I just want to share is that when we're using pesticides, a lot of times people think, oh, the less toxic ones are not as effective. Oh, they're just not that strong. Well, I want to share that oftentimes the least toxic ones are the most effective. A lot of times that they are very strong. The trick is that we want to always properly identify what the pest is. If we don't know what that pest is, it's going to be really challenging to be able to solve it specifically with a pesticide. From there, we want to understand what is the active ingredient of that pesticide, what is the mode of action that that pesticide requires, how does that pesticide work, and then we want to use it accordingly. But what we found is that oftentimes by employing cultural controls, mechanical controls, and biological controls, we typically will not need to reach for that pesticide. So let's move forward. Oh, and then one more thing I want to mention is something else I wanted to share is that also throughout this program, I'm going to be offering some suggestions, some strategies, some tips and techniques. However, keep in mind that every single situation is going to be a little different. Everyone has their own unique attributes. And IPM is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It rather employs all of these different tactics to address the problem. And then from there, we want to monitor these tactics, and we want to make sure that they're working as we intended. So that's just something else I wanted to point out before we move forward. Okay, stop, think, protect. IPM for varmints. It's going to be prevention, exclusion, and then elimination. So warning, I just want to let everyone know that I'm discussing pest management for varmints. And we'll be discussing elimination of these pests. Responsible elimination is to be done in the most humane way. This is a sensitive topic and I take it very seriously, but protecting these animals and eliminating them humanely is the most important priority. So rats and mice. More than a third of American homeowners have seen rodents in their home and garden in the last year. Rodents are a significant problem throughout the greater Bay Area, and I'd say maybe the entire state, but I strictly only work in the greater Bay Area. So I know I'm talking about rodent management almost every single day, helping people with their problems. Rodent populations can increase very quickly. They reproduce at rapid speeds. Rodents are more than just a nuisance. They can cause costly damage to the home and to vehicles. They carry fleas, ticks, and mice, but more importantly, those fleas and mites can be a very big problem. If we have rodents in the house, the fleas and mites can spread to our pets, our family, and to ourselves. They transmit diseases, and their waste is a contaminant. So as I mentioned, proper ID is key. We want to understand, is it a house mouse, a young rat, a roof rat, or a Norway rat? These are going to help us with our management strategies. For more information on proper identification of these rodents, you can go to the UC IPM website. It's very helpful. Rodents can move through holes as small as 3/8 of an inch in diameter. That's the size of a pencil. Mice are more curious than rats, so I find that it's easier to catch them in traps. However, I found that they're a little fussier about the bait we tried to lure them with. Rats are more cautious and suspicious of new things, specifically traps. And yet I find that they have a little broader range of food that they'll be attracted to. A mouse is smaller, weighing about 1/2 ounce, and is about 5 to 7 inches long. That's including their tail. Whereas roof rats weigh 5 to 10 ounces. A tail on a roof rat is going to be as long or longer than its body. And a Norway rat or sewer rat is larger, weighing about 7 to 18 ounces, and their tail is shorter than their body. Rats can chew through steel wool, expanding foam, aluminum, concrete, drywall, plaster, rubber, plastic, and wood. Pretty much anything you can think of, rats can chew through it. But rats cannot chew through 1/4-inch hardware cloth. This is the galvanized wire fencing or mesh. You find it in the fencing aisle at the hardware store. It's very inexpensive, very economical, easy to use, and very effective, working as a barrier, keeping rats out. Sheet metal roof flashing is also an effective barrier that keeps rats out. They cannot chew through it. So these are some examples of how we would use 1/4-inch hardware cloth and galvanized metal for exclusion. We were going to look around the home, see where there's any types of points of entry, such as the corner of the garage door or front door, backyard, so forth. And we will create these barriers that are going to be very effective to prevent them from moving through these small spaces. Rats in the house. We're going to replace weather stripping on the doors and garages. Make sure that those seals are nice and tight. We're going to check foundation and attic vents. We're going to remove those vents, and we're going to place 1/4-inch hardware cloth behind, and then we could put that decorative foundation vent right over that. So we won't see the 1/4-inch hardware cloth, but we know now that rodents can't move through it as easily. We're going to check for the fireplace vents, chimney flues, stove vents, laundry dryer vents to make sure that they're all securely covered with galvanized screen or 1/4-inch hardware cloth. We're going to use sheet metal roof flashing and hardware cloth to seal any hole, any gap, any crevice that rodents could fit through. And then if we need to fill in the gap, that 1/4-inch hardware cloth, if we need to make it solid, we can do so with expanding foam, with plaster, with mortar, whatever it is, because understand, though the rodents will chew through those parts, once they get to that hardware cloth, they'll stop chewing. We want to caulk under sinks and patch holes in walls with wall repair patch kits that include either that 1/4 inch hardware cloth or that roof flashing or some type of sheet metal. We want to place pet food in metal containers that close tight to prevent rodents from accessing the pet food. And in storage areas like a garage or a storage unit, we want to store items in plastic bins rather than cardboard boxes. Now, yes, rodents can chew through the plastic. However, we're not storing food or anything that's going to attract those rodents. Rather, we're just storing our items in plastic bins. What we found is that when we store in cardboard boxes, rodents easily use that cardboard box as nesting material. Rats in the garden. We're going to trim trees away from the home, understanding that rats can jump 3 feet across. So we want to make sure that those tree canopies are well away from our roof lines. We want to trim vines well below roof lines as well. And in fact, let's just remove the vines from the house nowadays, especially with the threat of fires that we're under every season. It's just a good idea to remove the vines. However, if it's a beautiful established vine that we've had on our home for years, let's just trim it really tight, low, well below the roof lines. We're going to remove the places of harborage. This includes those banks of ivy, those ground covers that billow, any types of dense shrubbery or dense planting. We want to either remove those or we want to prune them up. And what I mean by pruning up, if we've got a bank of dense shrubbery, if we just prune the bottom about 18 inches, that is now exposure. That is going to open up that area. Rodents know that they're prey, and they're going to be less likely to hang out in there or call that area their home. We want to remove their food sources. Food sources can look like a lot of different things. Food sources can come from compost stations and chicken coops. So we want to make sure we've contained those compost stations and we've sealed off those chicken coops. And what I mean by this is understand rodents can walk right through chicken wire. So let's build the chicken coops with 1/4 inch hardware cloth. We want to have a floor, walls, and ceiling and have it secured very tightly with the door. Same with the compost stations. We want to keep lids on garbage cans and green waste cans. We want to reduce the pet food availability. This means not feeding our pets outside or leaving food outside all day for our pets or for those feral kitty cats. If we only put the food out to feed our pets or those feral kitty cats, let's say at 8 a.m., and then we remove that food at 8:15 a.m., well, guess what? If those animals are hungry, they're going to learn that that's their window when they get to eat. We do not leave the food out all day because that's also going to attract a lot of other problems, including rodents. We want to rethink bird feeders. Understand that bird feeders are a banquet for the rodents. So make sure that the bird feeders are not accessible by the rodents. And as the birds feed on the feeders, seed falls on the grounds. Have a catchment system underneath so that the seed can get funneled into some type of a container and not just on the ground for rodents to then feed on. We want to exclude rodents from food gardens. Now, this might be really something unimaginable for many of us, but guess what? We can do it. These are some very simple exclusion baskets, exclusion cages that we can create. The picture on the left is a public education garden in San Francisco, and they've built these beautiful frames that are hinged and open up. They're very tall and very roomy, so they can grow just about anything in there that is about 8 feet tall, okay? And they are built with 2x2 frames, and 1/4 inch hardware cloth is stapled on. They are completely sealed from rodents and from birds and from humans, depending on what the pest might be. And then the picture on the left is also going to be a frame that's a little bit more casual, not as fancy, but gives you a good idea. I have exclusion baskets that are short, like the one on the right, that go over my strawberries and my leafy greens. And then I've got taller ones that go over my taller vegetables as they grow. We can also grow food and plants in metal troughs. Metal troughs that are about 20 inches tall or taller. Understand that rodents cannot jump up more than 18 inches. So we want something that's going to be about 20 inches or taller, so they cannot jump up into it. But we also want to make sure we don't have plant material trailing over the side, because if there is plant material, they can use that just as a ramp. When rodents get into cars, they can do quite a bit of very expensive damage. Every time I'm at my mechanics, I always hear someone getting the unfortunate news that they've had a rodent chew the wires in their car. We do not recommend placing repellents in or on the engine. The repellents that we use, if we're going to use them, we're going to want to put it around the perimeter of the car. Understand that repellents are not always going to be 100% effective because they're really just scent barriers. They're not physical barriers. We're going to park our vehicles with that air vent closed. So where there's that little switch that goes from fresh air or recirculating air, we want to have it in the recirculating air mode. The vent is going to be closed. We're also going to park our cars away from those rodent hiding places and from bird feeders. I just learned yesterday that there is an official Honda rodent tape that's infused with capsaicin. Capsaicin is a hot pepper. So I'd invite you to learn more about it. Like I said, I'm just hearing about it for the first time, so I have no indication how effective it is, but it's just kind of something that's fun and new. And then another thing we can do is we can physically bang on the vehicle to scare the rodents away. So why not use rodenticides? Rodenticides are a poison bait, and it's intended to be the only food source. So for that rodent to feed off of. So if we've got other food sources around, and understand rodents can roam on, quite a distance, a number of city blocks, they'll roam looking for food. If there's other food sources in the area, such as the vegetables in your garden, those nice leafy greens that they love, or chicken feed, or the garbage can across the street at the library, if they're eating a rodenticide that you've put out, and then they're eating other food, the other food is going to dilute that rodenticide, making it less effective to ineffective to that rodent. It also can take up to 14 days to kill that rodent. During that time, that rodent is still able to reproduce. The rodent can then die in the wall of your house or in another undesirable area, causing more of a problem. Poison hurts more than rodents. And I'd like to share that unintended consequences of secondary kill, that risk is for dogs, cats, raptors, and other carnivores. So what I'd like to share is, though that rodent has eaten that rodenticide, it might not have killed that rodent yet, but if a dog or a cat or a raptor, if anything else eats that rodent, it is going to be enough poison to impair, be lethal, or make that other unintended consequence very sick and possibly lethal. If you'd like more information to know how serious this is, reach out to your local vet or your local wildlife rescue and rehabilitation center. What about non-poison baits? There's some new non-poison baits on the market called Radex and Mousex. The active ingredient here is corn gluten meal and sodium. So essentially cereal and salt. Safe around livestock and chicken coops. They're not poison. So if a chicken were to eat this, if a dog or cat were to eat this, it's not a poison bait. It's just corn gluten meal and sodium. There's no risk of secondary kill. The way this works is that rodents cannot regurgitate. They ingest this non-poison bait, and it essentially disrupts their digestion. They're not able to digest this food, and that is the mode of action. It is intended also to be their only food source. So again, if we're putting this non-poison bait out and the rodents are feeding off of this, but they're also feeding off like chicken feed, or they're eating vegetables or anything else, it's going to dilute this and make it less effective to ineffective. So when we use these products, we have to make sure that it's going to be their only food source. And that's a little challenging to do. But I can also say that this is going to work, and it is guaranteed to kill the rodent within 4 days. So it's faster acting. Okay, another question comes up a lot is, what about the sticky glue traps? Well, I can share that they are absolutely not humane. The rodents have been known to gnaw their limbs off just to escape a sticky glue trap, which is really alarming. You need to be prepared to immediately kill that rodent once it's stuck on that trap, or else it will suffer. And other animals can get stuck on the trap as well. Cats, dogs, birds, snakes, lizards, whatever you've got in the house, they can go for if you're putting a little piece of food on that glue trap, they'll go for it and they'll get stuck. And that's a bigger problem, getting them unstuck. So the best, most effective way to manage rodents is working with kill traps. Kill traps can be the snap traps or the jaws or electric traps. And the way we work with these traps is we're going to bait these traps first without setting it. So if that's with the electric traps, we're just not putting the batteries in. And with the other traps, we're just not setting the snap function. We want to set the traps out and we want to bait them. Different types of baits we might use is a little piece of a meat stick, or a little piece of bacon, a little piece of a chewy granola bar, or a cookie similar to like a Fig Newton. Bait the traps with something that the rodents might already have been gotten into, such as kitty kibble or dog kibble, or maybe they got into that bag of Dorito chips that we left on the table last night. Let's bait the traps with that. You can also bait the traps with walnut or other nut meat, anything that you can think of. Halloween candy is excellent. Think about nutty, chewy, salty, sweet. And what we're doing is we're only putting the tiniest little piece on there. The one thing I can share about peanut butter is that I know very popular, people love to use peanut butter. However, peanut butter has a tendency to dehydrate, it shrinks, and that rodent then can release that little treat of peanut butter without setting the trap. So I just like you to be aware of these things, be prepared to try a couple of different types of baits until the rodent is going for the bait and then getting used to feeding off of that trap. You want to reload that trap multiple times with bait before you set it. We want those rodents to be very comfortable feeding from that station, so to speak. Once we have success and we've baited that trap and we've set it, we're going to monitor that trap. The minute we have a dead rodent, we want to remove it immediately, dispose of it in a sealed bag, and place it in the garbage. If you're having success for a number of days and then all of a sudden you've stopped having success, but you know there's still rodents present, they've gotten wise to the trap. We're going to want to just shift those traps a couple inches in one direction or the other. You also want to be prepared to change up the bait. If they saw that their pal got snapped and killed going for, let's say, the chewy granola bar, they're going to tell all of their friends, hey, chewy granola bar is off. We are not going for that. It killed our pal Jimmy. So just sharing. We just want to be flexible and we want to be prepared to outsmart the rodents, right? Some suggestions on how to place traps. So the professionals say, if you think you have one rodent, it's never just one. I think a lot of us are aware of that. However, they also recommend that we saturate the area with traps. They say the area should be saturated with 12 to 16 traps, no less. However, I think that's a little bit challenging. I will saturate an area with 4 or 6 traps, but it's going to be a lot for me to put 12 to 16 traps around my garage or my kitchen or wherever the rat or mouse situation is. So just wanted to share that. We are going to pre-bait those traps, and once baited and set, we're going to monitor. For more information on this, you can go to the UC IPM website. This is a really cool new trap that has been getting a lot of amazing feedback. This is the Nature A24. Some of you may have seen it already. Some of you might even have it. It is a CO2 trap that is humane and safe and effective for outdoor rodent management. This is strictly for outdoor use. We are seeing this at a lot of the Ace hardware stores, at the Friedman's Home Improvements, and as well as some of the feed stores around the greater Bay Area. So check this out. It's really cool. It's a little pricey, but I'm getting a lot of amazing feedback from people that have purchased it and then are using it. Okay, let's move on to gophers, moles, and voles. So again, proper identification is key. Gophers, moles, and voles are all very different types of critters. They do very different types of damage, and their habitats are very different, even though they all kind of have a similar appeal of being ground dwelling. They have their burrows underneath the ground. And I can share with you, all of us that have gopher problems or have been faced with gophers, sometimes they really are frustrating to deal with, but I can assure you, we are smarter than these critters. We are. And I will also share, with persistence and patience, we can outsmart them. Please. And if you need to, this is a great movie for some comic relief. So gophers. Gophers eat the roots of plants. Because of this, the best prevention is to work with exclusion barriers, such as planting plants in gopher baskets, lining raised beds and planters with 1/2-inch hardware cloth, or we can use official gopher wire. 1/2-inch hardware cloth we can use because the gophers are a little larger. We don't have to worry about them being so small and fitting through the holes. They cannot fit through 1/2-inch. So we don't need to use that 1/4-inch like we did with the rodents, the rats and the mice. I can also share that gophers are going to be tunneling a little deeper in below the soil. They're usually tunneling about 8 to 10 inches below the surface. But when they create a mound, it really looks like a crescent. So that's also going to be a good indicator. The best management strategy for working with gophers is by working with these traps. There's a lot of different types of gopher traps on the market, and they're all equally as effective. However, what I know is everyone has their favorites. So just get a trap that's going to be really easy for you to use. And a couple things to understand is that gophers have very extensive burrowing systems. They're very advanced. But when we have that activity where we saw that there was a fresh crescent, we can see the plug. It's very obvious. We dig that out. We place the trap right at the entrance of that tunnel. And then we're going to monitor. And I'll tell you, it doesn't take very long. The gopher recognizes that that plug is open, that there is a difference in the air pressure, and they know that they're prey. So they're going to go up and they're going to want to seal that hole again. As they're sealing the hole, a lot of times they're backfilling that trap. So this is why we'll see that the trap has been buried or has been packed with soil. It usually happens in about 15 minutes, maybe about 30 minutes. So after we've set the trap, go check it out. Go see, has he already come and backfilled it? If he has, that's great news. Clean out the trap, clean out the hole, put the trap back there. When we're persistent and we're patient, we will eventually have some success. If we do not see any activity at all, if there's no backfilling, then that is not an active run, and we'll have to move to another section. For more support, for some more tips on how to set traps and place traps, the UCIPM website has an amazing resource, a library of videos and pest notes that you can access. So check out their YouTube channel or go to their website. It's really helpful. So what about gassers and baits? So gophers can close off their tunnel very fast, faster than the blink of an eye. So if they sense any danger, they just close off that tunnel. So the gas from those gassers is only going to penetrate only so far into the system, and then it's only going to contaminate that section that it was able to access. The rest of the burrowing system is available for the gopher. Baits are not a natural food source. So what we've seen is that rodents, when they're digging new tunnels or accessing that tunneling system, they're actually going to push that food out, that bait out, because they know it's not something they would naturally eat. Now that bait is out, exposed, available for child or a cat or a dog to nibble on, or even any other animals that might be cruising around the property. So not an effective way to manage, and very risky for unintended consequences. Moles. So moles, they make mounds. Their mounds look more like volcanoes. They're really very clean mounds, and they tunnel very shallowly. They're tunneling right below the surface of the soil. So you physically can see their tunneling systems. Moles are eating bugs. So the way to get rid of moles, get rid of their food source. How do we get rid of their food source? We work with beneficial nematodes. How many of you have heard of beneficial nematodes? I love that some of you have. They're not that foreign, but they're really unique and interesting. They are microscopic worm-like organisms that feed off of soil-dwelling insects, such as larvae of beetles and other bugs, such as grubs. So working with beneficial nematodes is going to be a very effective way to remove the food source for the moles, so that the moles are not in that section of your garden. However, I see moles as beneficial because they're eating the larvae of bugs that'll later be pests in my garden. So just keep that in mind. Voles. Voles can be a real big problem, right? Voles love tall, grassy, weedy areas, and they are surface runners, so to speak. They will create these little runways through the tall grassy weeds and just cruise around from plant to plant. And they will gnaw the bark off of trees and shrubs. They will girdle the trunks and chew on the crown of our trees and shrubs, and oftentimes kill those trees and shrubs. So it can be a real problem. So the way we manage voles is by mowing the areas, getting those line trimmers out and trimming the weeds, trimming those grassy areas, clearing debris and growth of any other plant material around the crown of the plants. Expose that area, open it up. Again, voles know that they are prey. So when there's exposure, it's going to be less likely that they're going to come and gnaw on these areas. I can also share that voles create these very clean holes into the burrowing systems. So it's very obvious that it's a vole. And the best way to manage voles is you get one of those little wooden snap traps and you just place it in the runway perpendicular to the runway. So it's just the snappy side, or the trigger side, is on the path. And when they run by, they get snapped. So that's how we manage voles. So for more information on voles, moles, gophers, rats, and mice, you can check out the Our Water, Our World website and read these fact sheets. You can also go to the UCIPM website and read a lot of information on management for these critters. So let's move into squirrels, raccoons, and other urban critters. I would like to know how many of you saw this article that was in September's SF Gate. Really alarming. I'll tell you, it caught my attention. So at the moment, raccoons are a growing problem in our urban areas. But we're going to practice those same measures. We're going to work with prevention and exclusion. What does that look like? We're going to place tight-fitting hardware cloth on the attic vents and under the eaves. This prevents them from getting into the attics. We're going to contain those garbage cans and green waste cans. And what I mean by that is we're going to build a structure that we can put the garbage cans into, and we're going to lock that structure. Or we're going to do a really good job of locking the lids on the garbage can and green waste cans. I'll tell you this, raccoons can remove bungees. I've seen it, it's crazy. So we want to secure them really well with a locking system. We want to lock that cat and dog door at night because the raccoons are known to walk right in and they'll come right into your kitchen and they'll get in your cupboards. Happened to a friend of mine. Crazy. They're very bold. We do not want to leave pet food outside because it's just an invitation. We want to secure chicken coops, really secure them with a locking mechanism. We want to secure compost systems in the same fashion. We want to harvest our food crops in the garden. We want to clean up fallen fruit from the fruit trees. Sanitation is key. I want to share, many of us don't know this, but it is unlawful to feed wildlife. And I believe the fine is about $1,000. So the California Code of Regulations states that food and food scraps are not to be left out for wild animals. Individuals should also be aware that food for domesticated animals must not be left out during the night in an area that is accessible to predators. The predators include coyotes, raccoons, foxes, opossums, bears, mountain lions, bobcats. Okay, so what about the raccoons that damage my lawn? Every fall, I will share that the raccoons, I hear this all the time, they're digging up that turf and they're looking for the grubs. So what do? We keep that turf area healthy. We are going to fertilize with organic fertilizers. We're going to water the turf areas nice and deep. We're going to encourage healthy turf and grow beautiful, healthy lawn areas. We're going to use poultry wire as a barrier during that time of the year. It's typically just about 6 weeks. So I'm not saying put the poultry wire out all year round. I'm saying just during that time in the fall when they start digging. And the good news is we're not mowing those areas as often because we're starting to move towards winter and the growth of those lawn areas is going to slow down. So we just lay poultry wire out. And then we're training the animals that there is no reward. So they are going to learn over time not to come to your garden. Another way is remove the food source, as I mentioned, with beneficial nematodes. Okay, it's a win-win for raccoons and skunks also. But what about those have-a-heart traps that we see? Can I trap and relocate? Don't make more of a problem for yourself. Trust me. There's no guarantee what you're going to catch. What if you catch a skunk? How are you going to manage that? It's very challenging. Also, it's very dangerous. You can get bit, you can get scratched. It's a very serious deal. And also, I want to share that the California regulations from Fish and Wildlife say if you catch on site, you need to re-release on site. We do not get to relocate. So trapping laws and regulations for the state of California. California Department of Fish and Wildlife regulations for trapping fur-bearing and non-game animals. When we trap on site, we either re-release on site or we must euthanize humanely on site. We do not get to suffocate or drown the animals. We cannot use firearms within incorporated areas, and relocation is prohibited. So when we trap with these live traps, it's a real problem. Squirrels. So understand that ground squirrels are listed as non-game mammals. So an owner or a tenant can control or take in any humane, legal manner non-game mammals that are injuring growing crops or other property. Tree squirrels, on the other hand, are classified as game animals with a hunting season and cannot be taken without a permit. For more information on these laws, you can go to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife or the UC IPM websites. What if the animal's already in my house? Oh my gosh, have any of you had this problem, or having a squirrel under the foundation or a skunk under the foundation of your house or under the deck? This is very common. So first we want to make sure that they're not, they don't have a litter, that they don't have any babies that they've already birthed. Because if that's the case, we want to make sure we've removed all of them. If we've placed a one-way door out, if it's only that single animal, they don't have a litter, then that single animal is going to leave out the one-way door. But once they've left out the one-way door, we want to make sure they don't come back. And we want to seal all points of entry. We want to trim trees away from the house. Again, as we mentioned earlier, shrubbery away from the house. And then we also want to install barriers around the deck and the foundation. Again, we're going to work with those galvanized metal fencing types of materials. We're going to invite birds of prey. We understand that raptors are mice, rats, and gophers' natural enemies. I just read this awesome article that was given to me yesterday that barn owls can eat about 3,000 gophers per year. The adult can catch and eat 10 to 12 gophers per night while brooding between March and July. I've also heard that other owls, other than the barn owl, when they are brooding, they need to feed their young every 15 minutes. So they're out foraging and looking for prey. So inviting in the raptors is going to be another amazing way to keep these pest problems in balance. But by all means, we absolutely do not want to use rodenticides, because then we'll be killing off our beautiful raptors that are solving the problem for us. So more tips. Sometimes we need to hire a professional. So for some tips on hiring a professional, we can go to the UC and Our Water, Our World websites. So in close, I'd just like to share, when we try to pick anything out by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. Everything is connected. So with an IPM strategy, what we're trying to do is take actions that have minimal impact on the unintended object or the unintended pest. And I just want to share that I hope that this program was helpful, that you've learned some things, that you feel supported, and that you feel that now you can tackle these problems with a little bit more confidence, with more resources on your tool belt. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us. We're going to finish with your questions. For those of you that have to leave, have a beautiful day. You can always find us at YardSmartMarin.org, the Marin Master Gardeners, their website, and then also ourwaterourworld.org. And you can find me at plantharmony.org. Thank you very much. And have a beautiful day. For those of you who have to leave, for those of you that stay, let's have your questions.
Yes, and thank you, Suzanne. We've been gathering the questions as we go. And why don't we, so everyone, if you didn't hear before, two common questions. We did record this and we will be posting this in a couple weeks, and we'll send everyone who registered an email with a link to this, to the video. We'll also be sending an evaluation. And if I can just, before we turn to questions, if I can just ask you all to both look for that email later today as a thank you, but please do take one quick moment to answer a quick 4-question evaluation, because that feedback helps us keep able to provide these free programs and outreach and education. All right, well, with that, Suzanne, thank you. That was a lot of information, and now we're getting lots more questions. Let me start right up at the top with a couple common ones. Is Norway rat the same as a pack rat? And someone's got them in their greenhouse.
I'm not sure of the term pack rat. I know Norway rats are often also considered or called sewer rats. If they're in your greenhouse, then you'll have to find how they're coming in. Oftentimes they are burrowing underneath. So what we're going to do is we're going to get that 1/4-inch hardware cloth, and we're going to make a skirt that goes around the outside of the greenhouse. And the skirt means it's going to come up on the side of the wall of the greenhouse. That's where you're going to secure it. And then it's going to fold out and going to be on top of the soil, and it's going to extend out no less than 20 inches. What I understand is that they will not dig and come all the way from that 20-inch length. Now, I've only read this and I've heard people employ this technique. I personally have not had the experience of seeing that if this works. I would personally probably put a floor. I would probably line the floor and come up on the sides of the walls with the hardware cloth. And if I needed to, just put a couple inches of dirt, or I'd lay out some of that thick commercial weed block on top of the wire, or line it with some type of flooring.
Okay, great. And we're getting lots of questions about both habitat, food and shelter, and gardens. Let me start with a lot of questions about gardens with the exclusion cages that you were describing. Somebody said, can we send a picture of that? Yes, we can. We'll send that out in the email with the evaluation. But the questions about that are how to build a cage to deter rats, or where you can get it. Someone had a container garden, and even with netting, something was getting in and eating up parsley, arugula, dill. Yeah.
So netting, they can chew right through the netting. That's not going to be much of a deterrent. That's why we're talking about that 1/4-inch hardware cloth. 1/4-inch hardware cloth is that galvanized wire fencing. And it's very easy. I'll tell you my trick. I go to the garden center and I get the 1x1 redwood stakes. They're very economical, and I will attach them and make a frame, and then I will staple the hardware cloth on it. So it's almost like an upside down shoebox. You can also go to the hardware store or the lumber yard and get 1x2s or 2x2s and attach them that way. And you can make any shape, any size that's going to either fit over containers or fit to custom fit on top of your raised beds. Or as we saw in that one picture, let me see if I can go back to that really quickly. Hold on. Pardon me.
Okay.
There we go. So this is custom made to go on top of these raised beds, and it's hinged. This is very, very fancy. I love it. And the guys that built this, Big Fun Gardens, you can check them out. Maybe they can custom build something for you, but these are not difficult things. I'm not that mechanical, and I just kind of like stapled stuff together and it worked. And the picture on the right also illustrates this is really just PVC kind of screwed together on wooden stakes, and then the hardware cloth just kind of like wired on. It's overlapping quite a bit, but the point is just to find a way to have a barrier. And then from there, we're going to clean up the garden and make sure we're removing all access to food in their garden. And then what we're doing is we're training them not to come to our garden. When we have food accessible, it's an open invitation.
Right. And Suzanne, related to that, someone's asking if the hardware cages will keep out bees and pollinators, but it's pretty removable, right? You can just pop it off and on.
The the micro pollinators will still be able to get through. If it's a food crop that needs to have a pollination, then you might want to have the door or the cage, the basket removed during the daylight hours so that the pollinators can actively forage. If it's leafy greens that don't need a pollinator, which is very common for rodents to just gnaw down an entire bed of kale or chard, we don't ever need to remove it until we're harvesting or grooming those plants.
Great. And I've got two related questions about the garden. Let's see. Actually, sorry, not about the garden, about other alternatives. Several people asked about peppermint oil or cayenne pepper to keep rats and or squirrels away. And
so understand that there's a number of repellents on the market, and I've worked in the industry for a long time. And I've heard, and I work with retailers and I work with vendors and I work with consumers, and I get a lot of feedback if the products work. And there are some products on the market, such as Critter Ritter, that gets a lot of favorable feedback that it works. However, we have to keep in mind that it is possible that these deterrents can fail because they're just scent barriers. They're not solid barriers. And I'd also like to share that sometimes when we are making homemade remedies, though it's in our best intention to do something that's safe and effective, sometimes our homemade remedies can be more harmful and dangerous. So I would just like to share is use caution, do some research, and understand that repellents are just scent barriers. And in time, rodents and urban critters can get used to it and walk right over. I also know that there's those water, what are they called? You know, it's the like the scarecrow. It's a water sensor. When like raccoons or deer come into the garden, it blasts them with water. You can try those also. It's just, we want to do a little research and understand what we're employing, and then know that there's going to possibly be room for error, or that at some point these products might not work anymore.
Okay. And Suzanne, thank you guys for sharing all of your questions. I'm getting a lot more in. Several of them are asking about materials that rats can and can't climb. So in particular, the questions are, can rats climb up wood, not climb up metal, cement planters, metal troughs? Can you help clarify that?
Yeah, so they can climb up a lot of, they can climb just about anything. However, from what I understand is that they cannot necessarily jump. And this is the language I've heard the professionals use. So when we think about the roof flashing, that's usually about 20 or 22 inches. If we've ever been down to San Diego or Santa Barbara, we see it high up in those palm trees. That roof flashing is there to prevent the rodents from nesting up in the palm trees. My understanding is that they can't cross that roof flashing because it's so slick. I also understand that a lot of the galvanized troughs that we see on the market nowadays are also equally as slick and that they can't climb up it. Now, I could be wrong. I'd like, if anyone's had an experience where they know that they can climb, I want to hear this because I don't ever like giving people information that is not going to be helpful for them. However, what I understand is the troughs are very popular for preventing rodents from getting into the plants and feeding off of them. However, as I mentioned in that one photo, we want to make sure the plants are groomed away from the edge. They're not trailing over. And we want to make sure they can't access the planters from like a fence or from a building or something else that's maybe just next to it.
Okay, and we've got on that same topic, we've got a couple questions about chicken coops and preventing rats, as well as habitat for rats, juniper, ivy. And I think you covered that, but do you want to reinforce that?
Yeah. So chicken coops, Rika, was there a specific question or is it just more?
It was interesting. Actually, specific question was rats around the chicken coop. And I just want to bring up a related comment somebody shared. That rats got into their crawl space. This person called an exterminator, and the exterminator did an inspection and called out the hens next door that were attracting the rats and mice. But that exterminator didn't talk about exclusion. So just on that specific point, I just want to point out that exterminators don't have a vested interest in helping you prevent the problem long-term. So they'll point out anything else that's the problem instead of refocusing folks on prevention and exclusion from getting inside the house. And in our resource page, there's more about that. But the question specifically about chicken coops was rats getting into chicken coops.
Yeah. So when we hire a professional, we do want to ask a few more questions. Hopefully this program has, armed you with more information so you can ask smarter, better questions. However, there are a couple professionals that have IPM practices. So there's not many of them out there, but there are a couple. So you're going to just want to ask and find out. As far as chicken coops, again, we're going to build those chicken coops with 1/4-inch hardware cloth. We want to make sure that the space is confined and sealed away from rats and mice. So what does that look like? It could be a 1/4-inch hardware cloth on a wooden frame, floor, walls, and ceiling. Or it could be a combination between the plywood and the 1/4-inch hardware cloth. It just kind of depends, but we want to make sure we wrapped the plywood with 1/4-inch hardware cloth so that those corners, those edges, the rats are not able to gnaw at.
Sweet.
There is, I know if you do some internet research, you can get information on this. But just think about exclusion. How can you, make that chicken coop Fort Knox? That's really what we're trying to get at. And if we're lining the bottom of the chicken coop with that 1/4-inch hardware cloth to protect the chicken's toes, so to speak, is we're going to just layer a number of inches of soil and then a couple inches of EcoFlake so that when they scratch, they're not going to get their little toes caught in the wire.
Okay. And I just want to, in case we're going to stay on and answer more questions, but I just want to remind anyone who's going to jump off to please take a moment and fill out our evaluation because it helps us to continue to offer these free programs. You can look for a link in the chat or we'll be emailing it out right after as well. And let me turn back to questions. Tracy just put the link to the survey in the chat. So if you're still with us, it'd be awesome if you could actually do that while we're talking. Literally 30 seconds, real quick. Okay, a couple more questions, lots actually more questions. We've gotten several about just more clarity about alternatives to rat problems that will not kill rats or mice. And I think it takes us back to the topic of exclusion.
Yeah. So I'm going to just remind everyone that it's prevention, exclusion, and then elimination. There's really no other alternatives other than making sure they cannot come in to where you don't want them to come in. And that's kind of it. Outside, you know, rodents and other animals have free will. They can roam around and go places. It's a little bit more challenging, but there's that really awesome outdoor trap. Let's see if I can get there. There we go. We can employ this and we can help reduce the populations outside. And if you were interested in me talking more about the mouse X and rat X, this is an alternative to poison rodenticides. This is a non-poison bait. It is corn gluten meal and sodium. It is essentially cereal and salt. This is something we can eat. It is not poison. So there's no risk of secondary kill, and it was designed to use around livestock and chicken coops. So this is not going to harm anything else that eats it. But the way it works is because rodents cannot regurgitate, they ingest this, and then that it disrupts their stomach digestion system. So they're not able to digest this food and they can't vomit. So that's how it kills them. However, when we use products like this, it could take up to 4 days to kill the rodent. Meanwhile, that rodent is still reproducing. So it's still increasing its population, and there's risk of it dying in a wall or somewhere around the house. We really want to avoid that because of the, primarily because of the flea and mite that they carry. When a rodent dies in the wall or somewhere in like a crawl space, those fleas and mites now leave and they need to find something else they can live on. So it's going to go to your pets, your children, other members of the family, yourself, and it's really horrific. Okay, this is common. Sadly, I hear about this more often than I'd like to. So the best way to manage rodents is to work with those instant kill traps, either the snap traps or the electric traps. Now, I know it is not easy for many of us. I've had to learn to get very brave. I don't like to deal with the death. However, it is the only way we can guarantee that we are reducing the populations and managing our pest problem. From there, we're going to exclude and prevent them from coming in to these areas.
And Suzanne, related to tackling them in other ways, we got a lot of questions about how to encourage owls and raptors as natural predators.
Well, I love that. So when we encourage them by not using these poison baits, absolutely do not use rodenticides. And you also encourage them by putting up an owl box. There's a lot of really great information right now online that talks about how to build an owl box. They're much larger than they used to be. They found that larger is better for the owls. And they also go into maintaining these owl boxes because they do need to get cleaned out and such. But having an owl box is a wonderful way to invite the raptors. Yeah.
Okay. And going back to traps for a moment, we had a question about whether the gopher traps would work for voles or if they're all sort of specialized for different types of rodents.
The gopher traps will work for moles and gophers. So I have caught moles by accident. Like I said earlier, I like moles. I see them as beneficial. Okay. Voles are very tiny. They're like field mice. So you're going to use that little tiny wooden snap trap. Typically, I think Victor or Tomcat, they have these little wooden snap traps that you can just place out. You set it, you do not bait it. You just set it and you put it in their runway And then when they run through, they get snapped.
Great. And we've got a related question that's pretty detailed. Maybe we'll follow up with it's basically about a slate patio and something's burrowing under it. They have seen in their vicinity rats and moles and voles. I don't know. I think that one actually might be better taken offline.
Well, this is common. I mean, you can, if you're not able to, if they are able to come up and make some type of a mound, that means there's enough space between the patio pieces to actually employ some type of a trap. If there are, if it's a mole, it's going for food source. If it's a gopher, it's going for plants. So if there's plants there and they're nibbling the roots, then you know it's a gopher. So if it's a mole going for the food, then we're going to want to remove that food source and work with something like beneficial nematodes.
That is great. Thank you for clarifying. And we did get a couple of questions related to squirrels. One is how to keep them from chomping on succulents. And the other was whether using a sizzling hot brand of birdseed that supposedly squirrels don't like.
Well, you can try the birdseed that squirrels don't like if the squirrels are already going for the birdseed, but I would not put birdseed out around my garden beds just to deter squirrels, because now we're inviting in other problems. If you have a bird feeder that squirrels are accessing and the squirrel baffle isn't working, then yes, use that type of bird food if you'd like.
And actually, I think that the question was also, would rats avoid that type of bird seed as well?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if rats would. The best, again, when we work with deterrents that are scent or flavored, we are not necessarily guaranteeing that it's going to work, because there could be either that batch that isn't as peppery, or there is that critter that has no effect. Their taste buds are not functioning as the others. We want to work with solid barriers to prevent these problems.
That is great. We got one question that doesn't fall into any of these categories, which is someone's having a big problem with turkeys.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Yes, they are terrible. I know that UCIPM just put out a pest note on turkey management. I apologize. I haven't sat in on any of those classes. It is all really new. I'm not sure exactly what would be the best mode of action. I know that, if you have a dog, let the dog chase the turkeys off. I know turkeys can be very bold and very aggressive. I'm not sure if hosing the turkeys is going to be helpful. Getting one of those scarecrows, that's the motor sensory water sprinkler, or just blasting with water. I'm not sure. So I apologize.
Well, and we will be including, and already have included, the link to the UC. We can include a link to the UC IPM website, and that is a great place to find that.
Yeah, it's on the resource page that I sent out to everybody.
Yeah. Okay, and we've got another question. If you can just refer us to where we had information about how to set and place traps.
Yes.
I think you referred to that already.
Yes, it's right here, UCIPM. So what I like to do is I just go to YouTube, and in the search bar, I just type in those 5 letters, UCIPM, University of California Integrated Pest Management is what it stands for. I type in those 5 letters, UCIPM, I go to their page and I scroll down and I see these videos. Another way you can go is go to their website and just go to Gophers, and these videos will pop up on the Gophers page, or links to these videos will.
Okay, great. One question about, back to the raptors for a moment. Should people with small dogs under 10 pounds be worried about inviting raptors?
Oh, I don't know if you should be worried about it, but you should, I've seen these really cool things that you will want to put on your dog It is a raptor and coyote protection. It's like this little punk rock like vest that has these spikes. So that's very common for people that live in these urban areas that have wildlife that are hanging out with people. So,
okay, great. Oh, here's the crazy question, and I'm glad you asked because it's good to throw out all these questions and get an answer. Can I put used cat litter in the ivy bed right near my raised garden beds to get the rats to move out?
no, that's not going to do anything to the rats. And in fact, it's just going to cause more of a problem. So we're going to, because we don't want that getting into the stormwater. It's going to cause, if we get down in the sewer system, it's going to cause some problems there. Definitely will cause any problems downstream. We don't want that into the waterways. So the best way is to remove that ivy. Now that is a big deal, costs a lot of money, but after it's removed, your problem is also removed.
Yeah, and actually we did have quite a few questions about habitat. One was, are creeping raspberries also ground cover for rats as well as ivy?
I don't know how thick that is. So if it is thick, then yes. But if it's flat, because I have some at my house and it's very flat. It hasn't really, I mean, it's not that established. It's not that old. Maybe over time it gets really thick. Or unless it's a plant that I'm not, I could be misunderstanding exactly what plant, because some plants have same common names. But if a rat or a mouse can hide out in there, then it's a problem.
Yep. And are there shrubs that can encourage rats, or other, like what other types of habitat should we be looking for?
Anything that a little critter can feel that they're hiding is a nice hiding place for them, where they're getting shelter from their predators, is going to be, where they're hiding out. So it could be shrubs, it could be perennials, it could be grasses. So now what I've also learned when I talk to people is that they know exactly where these rodents are. They know, yeah, they're coming in from the ivy, or yeah, I see them running on the fence line, or yeah, they're hanging out near the chicken coop. So if that's the case, then we're going to focus the attention in those areas. If you've got a beautiful established perennial bed up in the front and never seen any rodent activity, don't focus your attention there. Focus your attention on the chicken coop. And let's look at the different places where the rodents might be living. Is there a stack of bricks from that patio project that we haven't used and we haven't gotten rid of? Is there a stack of wood, or is there a stack of flagstone, or is there, I don't know, a bunch of old pots or potting bench that we just don't use, where we know that there's just some things that have accumulated that maybe rodents are nesting in? Sanitation is key. We want to clear these areas. We want to remove these wood piles. And I'm not talking about the wood piles where we're actively, using as fuel for our fires. That wood is going to get stacked appropriately and very intentionally. This is those old wood piles that are in the back of the property that have already started to decompose. That's where a lot of times we see rodents living. So we want to remove any of those places of harborage.
Okay, that is great. We have a question back to squirrels. And do you have any advice on how to prevent squirrels from eating succulent leaves?
Oh, yes. Yeah, sorry, you did ask that. You have to put a basket over it. So I had a picture that I removed, and I'm sorry, but it was a bird feeder that had one of those squirrel baffle cages that would protect the feeder. This was at a friend's house, and the feeder itself fell and broke, but she didn't want to just throw this like baffly cage part of it off. So, and it was really pretty and decorative. So she had it just placed right over one of her decorative, glazed pots with violas growing inside of it. It was beautiful. So you can get decorative cloches and decorative wire baskets that you can just place right on top. It doesn't have to be weird. You can also just move the plants to another area, maybe an area where the squirrels cannot access. Squirrels are really challenging and really difficult to prevent. So exclusion is really the only thing.
Yep. And I think that might be the answer to this question as well. Someone, and this has happened to me, someone had a beautiful tomato harvest, and before they could harvest anything, something ate them. And the question is, was it squirrels, rats? Is there a way to tell?
Well, one way to tell is if you know you've got squirrels on your property. It could have been squirrels, but it's usually rats. And something that I share with people is that I use those exclusion baskets, but then the tomatoes at some point are going to get too tall. And so once those tomatoes kind of outgrow the baskets, you know, they're almost as tall as me at this point. Now I will prune the bottom of the tomato up, remove any foliage that's there, and I'm going to prune it up about 18 inches. I do this with any shrubs as well. And the reason why is now there's exposure, and rodents, again, know their prey, and they're not going to go in areas as often when there is exposure. They typically go into areas where they're hiding and they're safe.
That makes sense. Yep. And we had another identification question. Can you tell, can the size of rodent feces help identify what kind it is? And
absolutely.
Yeah, because they have large poop all over their decks, so they're assuming it's rats. Would that be accurate?
I'm not sure. You say it's large. So you can go to the UCIPM website to have a look. You can also just do an internet search. I know that mouse droppings are about the size of a sesame seed. And then the roof rats and nori rats, I believe the roof rats have kind of a medium size, like maybe the size of a small grain of rice. And then the roof rats, the nori rats will have a much larger dropping that is much bigger than that grain of rice. So.
Okay, and we're getting lots of great questions. Somebody was saying about raccoons. They have an area in the back corner of their yard that the raccoons are using as a toilet area. How to discourage this?
That is a good question. That is a good question. I might have to, if that person can email me, or if we can get that person's contact information, I'd like to follow up with that, because I don't have an answer at the moment. And I would like to reach out to some of my experts that I work with and ask them and get back to you.
Okay.
I mean, one thing that comes to mind is just making a barricade. So sometimes what I'll do is, again, getting that poultry wire or making just a little like fence off the area so they can't get to it. Poultry wire is amazing. It's easy, it's lightweight, it's it's not expensive, it's easy to store. I'll put it around for kitty cats that like to dig and poop in my garden areas. But I would probably just try putting poultry wire down and see if that helps. Sometimes something else you can do is, when we buy a tray of plants at the garden center, either a 6-pack or 4-inch plants, comes in that black tray that sometimes just putting that upside down. So there's like, it's a couple inches, now it's above ground, and then maybe putting the poultry wire on top of that. So now it's raised and it's a problem, but then anchoring the wire down in a way that they can't move it. So landscape pins to anchor it.
Yep. I love creative solutions to all of these problems, because it helps me remember that I can be smarter than the
Yeah, we're smarter than these critters. We just forget.
Yep.
The other thing is that we've trained them to come to our properties. We've trained them to eat our food. We've trained them to live in our gardens. So now we just have to retrain them. So when we can put up these deterrents and put up these barriers, we're training them that, okay, we're just not going to go to her house today.
Yeah. Well, and somebody reminded us, and it's very true, Wild Care is a wonderful local resource as well for some of these common wildlife problems. And
True.
yeah, and they also, are a partner for YardSmartMarin, because when we did a campaign to raise awareness about rodenticides and the unintended consequences, they have really horrifying statistics about the amount of rodenticides that are found in the animals of all species, including raptors, obviously, that are poisoned by rodenticides. So yeah, Wild Care is a fantastic resource. And, often they're seeing the squirrels or the raptors that are getting sick and dying from the rodenticide. So we really appreciate that all of you have joined us here today. If you have other questions that we didn't have a chance to get to or that I missed, please feel free to follow up with an email or any of the resources that we have. And we really are so appreciative that you joined us. And don't forget, we have 2 other free seminars coming up. February 27th, we're going to be tackling how to manage weeds safely and effectively. And March 13th, we're going to be talking about bringing in beneficial bugs. So thank you, everyone. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time and staying in touch by email so that we can share a recording of this with you in a few weeks. Suzanne,
Thank you so much. Really. Thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful to see all of you today. Thanks for joining us. It's so great. Look at all your faces. Oh, I love it. Yes. Hi, faces. So good to see you. Hey, everyone, get outside, enjoy this beautiful day. And hi. I look forward to seeing you all really soon. It was fun. You all are awesome. Keep up the good work. And yes, go get those critters. You're smarter than they are. I know you are.
All right. And if you have other questions that weren't answered, feel free to email us. I know we have some wonderful resources about roses. People were asking, and UC Marin Master Gardeners, as well as the local Rose Society, both have excellent resources with least toxic solutions and lots of education. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye-bye. Have a great day.